The P-Tech story. The war on terror that we are currently living through was birthed on September 11, 2001. The neocons used the events of that day as their excuse to redraw the map of the Middle East, eviscerate the Bill of Rights, erect the Homeland Security Police state, and aggressively expand the federal government's size and power. More recently, however, we have witnessed the birth of a new era, the war on cyberterror. Attempts to hack into sensitive government computer systems, new forms of ransomware infecting computers around the globe, and online threats to our critical infrastructure are being invoked to justify a rapid expansion of the cybersecurity establishment. But there has yet to be a catalyzing event in the online sphere equivalent to September 11th. Or, in the parlance of the cyber warmongers, we have yet to see a cyber 9/11. Or so we have been led to believe. In actual fact, the most incredible cyberterror attack of all time has already taken place. What's more, it took place on 9/11, the very same day that the war on terror was declared. This cyber hit involved government-designated terrorists and a software company with direct access to some of the most sensitive computer systems in the United States. And the story of how it happened is all the more remarkable because almost no one has ever heard it. Why not? Because the burgeoning cybersecurity establishment must suppress the story. Why? Because it demonstrates that the very federal agencies that are clamoring for more power on the pretext of the cyberterror hysteria are the exact same entities that were actively complicit in the biggest breach of cybersecurity in history. And, according to the FBI agents whose investigation into the story was suppressed, this cybersecurity failure is what allowed 9/11 to occur and the war on terror to begin. This is a story of international terror and terrorist financiers. It stretches from America to Saudi Arabia. It involves businessmen, politicians, and terror networks. And it begins in the most unlikely of places, the offices of an obscure enterprise architecture software firm headquartered in a sleepy Boston suburb. Enterprise architecture software refers to a computer program that visualizes all of an organization's data, including its transactions, interactions, systems, processes, and personnel. The all-encompassing nature of this software effectively gives its user a bird's-eye view of an enterprise, allowing for real-time mapping, visualization, and analysis of a business or agency. One way this type of software can be used is to create extremely detailed and accurate projections of how changes in a business processes would affect its bottom line. What would happen if two departments were merged, for example, or if a business were to outsource some of its production? As this software began to mature in the 1990s, however, it went from a merely useful tool to something truly revolutionary. Sophisticated enterprise architecture software could, for instance, analyze all of the transactions taking place across a financial institution in real time and examine that data for possible money laundering operations or rogue traders. Such software could even have potentially detected and identified the insider trading leading up to 9/11. See the 9/11 terror trade elsewhere in this book. Combined with rudimentary AI capabilities, this program would not only be able to identify illegal transactions but could stop those transactions as they are happening. If the software were sophisticated enough, it might even be able to warn the company about illegal activity before it takes place. The utility of enterprise architecture software for organizations of all stripes should be obvious enough. It isn't surprising, then, that numerous government agencies and powerful corporations were hungry for this type of computer program in the 1990s. What is surprising, though, is that so many of them, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, the Secret Service, the White House, the Navy, the Air Force, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, IBM, Booz Allen Hamilton, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and a host of other U.S. government agencies, financial institutions, and multinational corporations turned not to one of the tech giants but to a small, New England-based software firm called P-Tech to supply this sensitive software. P-Tech, Inc. was founded in Quincy, Massachusetts, in 1994. Within its first 2 years, it had already secured a contract with DARPA to help transfer commercial software methodologies to the defense sector. Point 1 Then, in 1997, it gained security clearance to bid on sensitive contracts with the Department of Defense and other government agencies. Point 2. By 2001, P-Tech had built up a stable of clients that would make any third-party software vendor green with envy. From the inner sanctum of the White House to the headquarters of the FBI, from the basement of the FAA to the boardroom of IBM, some of the most highly secured organizations in the world, running on some of the most protected servers housing the most sensitive data, welcomed P-Tech into their midst. As a provider of enterprise architecture software, P-Tech was, in effect, given the keys to the cyber kingdom of the entire US government. Its entry into this cyber sanctum enabled the firm to build detailed pictures of its clients' organizations, including their weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Tech's analyses showed how these problems could be exploited by those with ill intent, ostensibly to help their customers defend against such attacks. Yet hidden behind its dazzling success was a worrying fact: many of Tech's top investors and employees had backgrounds that should have raised red flags with its clients. The firm was launched with $20 million of startup money, $5 million of which was provided by Sarmony Limited, an investment company owned and controlled by Yassin al-Qadi. Point 3 Al-Qadi is a wealthy, well-connected Saudi businessman who likes to brag about his acquaintance with Dick Cheney. Point 4 He also has ties to various Muslim charities that have been accused of funding international terrorism. Point 5 In the wake of 9/11, Al-Qadi was officially declared a specially designated global terrorist by the US government, and his assets were frozen. Point 6 At the time, Tech's owners and senior managers denied that Al-Qadi was involved in any way other than his initial investment. But a 2007 indictment shows that the FBI believed him to be lying. Point 7 It alleges that Al-Qadi had continued to invest millions of dollars in the company through various fronts and investment vehicles. Point 8 In 2002, Al-Qadi's lawyers admitted that it was possible a representative for Al-Qadi continued to sit on Tech's board, until recently. 9. Hussein Ibrahim, Tech's vice president and chief scientist, was a former vice president of BMI, a New Jersey-based real estate investment firm that was also one of the initial investors in P-Tech and that provided financing for Tech's founding loan. Point 10 BMI leased computer equipment to P-Tech 11 and accepted payments on behalf of KD International, owned and operated by none other than Yassin al-Qadi. Point 12 In 2003, counterterrorism Sir Richard Clarke acknowledged that while BMI held itself out publicly as a financial services provider for Muslims in the United States, its investor list suggests the possibility this facade was just a cover to conceal terrorist support. 13. Another colorful character connected to P-Tech was Suhail Lara, who served as Tech's chief software architect. When he wasn't writing the code that would provide P-Tech with detailed operational blueprints of the most sensitive agencies in the US government, he was writing articles in praise of Islamic holy war. Point 14 Lara was also fond of quoting Abdullah Azzam, Osama bin Laden's mentor and the head of Maktab al-Qidamat, which was the precursor to al-Qaeda. That such an unlikely bunch was given access to some of the most sensitive agencies in the US federal government is startling enough. That they were operating software that allowed them to map, analyze, and access every process and operation within these agencies for the purpose of finding systemic weak points is even more astonishing. Most disturbing of all, though, is the connection between P-Tech and the very agencies that are to blame for the events of September 11, 2001. For 2 years prior to 9/11, P-Tech was working to identify potential problems or weaknesses in the FAA's response plans to events like a terrorist hijacking of a plane over US airspace. According to its own business plan for the FAA contract, P-Tech was granted access to every process and system in the FAA dealing with crisis response protocols. This included analyzing the FAA's network management, network security, configuration management, fault management, performance management, application administration, network accounting management, and user help desk operation. 15 In other words, P-Tech had free rein to examine every system and process the FAA uses to deal with the exact type of event that would come to pass on 9/11. As if that weren't astounding enough, P-Tech was tasked with specifically analyzing the potential interoperability problems between the FAA, NORAD, and the Pentagon in the event of an emergency over U.S. airspace. The scope of its work with these agencies gave P-Tech operational information about the systems that the FAA, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, and others employed during crisis response exercises like Vigilant Guardian, the NORAD exercise that was taking place on 9/11.16. These exercises included simulations of hijacked jets being flown into New York 17 and hijacked jets being flown into government buildings. 18 This is significant because there is every indication that the drills were devised to create confusion between them and the real-world events NORAD was responding to that day. As researcher Michael Ruppert points out, a rogue agent with access to a P-Tech backdoor into the FAA's systems could have been deliberately inserting fake blips onto the FAA's radars on 9/11.19. That scenario would explain the source of the Phantom Flight 11 inches that the FAA reported to NORAD at 9:24 a.m. Well after Flight 11 had already hit the World Trade Center, a report whose source the 9/11 Commission claims it was unable to find. 20. In short, on the morning of 9/11, Tech's software designed for the express purpose of giving its users a complete overview of all the data flowing through an organization in real time was running on the very systems that were supposed to defend against 9/11-style attacks. The father of enterprise architecture himself, John Zachman, explained that with P-Tech type software installed on a sensitive server, you would know where the access points are, you'd know how to get in, you would know where the weaknesses are, you'd know how to destroy it. 21. This is where the FBI enters the story. In the late 1990s, Robert Wright, an FBI special agent in the Chicago field office, was running Vulgar Betrayal, an operation tracking terrorist financing. 22 From the very start, the probe was hampered by higher-ups. Wright and his associates were not even allocated adequate computer equipment to carry out their work. 23 Through Wright's foresight and perseverance, however, the investigation managed to score some victories, including the seizure of $1.4 million in U.S. funds that traced back to Yassin al-Qadi. 24 Wright was pleased when a senior agent was assigned to help dig up info on the founder and the financier of P-Tech, but the agent did no work and merely pushed papers during his entire time on the case. 25. Shortly after the 1998 African embassy bombings, Vulgar Betrayal began to uncover a money trail linking al-Qadi to that attack. Yet, according to Wright, when he proposed a criminal investigation into the al-Qadi links, his supervisor flew into a rage, saying, "You will not open criminal investigations. I forbid any of you. You will not open criminal investigations against any of these intelligence subjects." 26 Wright was taken off the Vulgar Betrayal case the next year, and the operation itself was shut down in 2000. Meanwhile, in the aftermath of 9/11, Indira Singh was looking for enterprise architecture software to implement the next generation of risk management for J.P. Morgan Chase, where she worked as a risk management consultant. Impressed by Tech's client list, Singh invited the firm to demonstrate its software to the bank. In performing her due diligence on the deal, though, she soon discovered the connections between P-Tech and international terrorist financing. Singh worked exhaustively to document and uncover these links in an effort to persuade the FBI agents in Boston to open their own investigation into P-Tech. However, as she later related to Bonnie Faulkner on KPFA's Guns and Butter radio program, one bureau agent told her that she herself was in a better position to get to the bottom of the case than was anyone inside the FBI. 27 Despite the persistent efforts of Singh and the testimony of company insiders, the FBI did not inform any of the agencies contracting with P-Tech that there were concerns about the company or its software. 28. Finally, in late 2002, Operation Greenquest, a U.S. Customs Service-led multi-agency investigative unit that had been formed in October 2001 to do surveillance and interdiction of terrorist financing sources, raided the offices of P-Tech, which it suspected had ties to al-Qadian terror financing. But that very same day, White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer declared the company and its software safe. Mainstream news articles on the raid were at pains to include Tech's denial that a raid had taken place. Instead, P-Tech officials insisted they had granted access to investigators. They also claimed the government had assured them that neither P-Tech nor its officers or employees are targets of the government's investigation. 29. The P-Tech raid resulted in no indictments. Neither al-Qadi nor anyone else at the company was charged with any crime. Instead, Michael Chertoff, then head of the Department of Justice's Criminal Division, led a controversial effort to move Greenquest under the control of the FBI. 30 and, in June 2003, the operation was disbanded. 31. For his efforts, Chertoff was rewarded with a position as a United States Circuit Judge and, in 2005, was appointed as United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Meanwhile, after years of legal wrangling, al-Qadi succeeded in having his name removed from the specially designated global terrorist list. 32. The P-Tech cover-up now complete, the press went silent on the story. The final report of the 9/11 Commission, released in 2004, does not mention P-Tech. Given the remarkable information that had been uncovered about this company's links to both the U.S. government and terror financing, Tech's absence from the report is perplexing, to say the least. But the omission became positively ominous when it was discovered that 9/11 Commission co-chair Thomas Keane made $24 million off a land deal with the P-Tech-linked BMI. 33. 7 years after the raid on P-Tech, in July 2009, there finally appeared to be a break in the FBI case. The Bureau's Boston field office unsealed a 2007 indictment of Usama Abdul Ziadeh, Tech's former CEO, and Buford George Peterson, its former CFO and COO. The indictment accused the pair of knowingly omitting the extent of al-Qadi's investments and ties with P-Tech when they submitted a loan application to the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, a federal agency. 34. Peterson was arrested at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York the same day the indictment was unsealed. But his 2010 trial ended in a hung jury when the evidence showed that it was Ziadeh, not Peterson, who prepared the loan application to the SBA. In 2012, Peterson's indictment was dismissed by the United States Attorney for the District of Massachusetts. 35. Ziadeh, having fled to Lebanon, has never been arrested or faced trial under the indictment. For over 2 decades, investigations into P-Tech, its employees, and its investors have been stifled, suppressed, or derailed by people in positions of power. That suits the U.S. Cyber Command, the NSA, the FBI, and all of their cronies in the terror industrial complex just fine. 4. As far as they're concerned, the entire P-Tech affair, exposing as it does the culpability and potential complicity of the FBI and other federal agencies tasked with protecting the homeland, is best left swept under the rug and never spoken of again. Nonetheless, the P-Tech saga is proof that we have already endured one cyber 9/11, and that it happened on 9/11 itself. Note: